Welcome, welcome to the part 17 of AZ304 real exam questions. Please subscribe to my channel. For questions 1 to 103, you may refer parts 1 to 16 of this video series. In this part, we will look at some case studies. So there are three important case studies that usually comes in the exam, out of which one is Fabricam, which we are covering in this video. Now, the technique to answer the questions related to these are: first, you read the question. Many times, there is no strict relationship between the question and the case study. What I mean is, even if you try to answer the question in isolation, you will still be able to do that. So this is the first part of the case study, where it covers the existing environment with respect to Active Directory and network infrastructure. Then this is the next part where it covers plan changes and the requirements, the technical requirements. And this is the third part where it talks about database requirements and security requirements. So in the real exam, you would get tabs for each of these requirements. So it is relatively easier and structured to read it. Now let's read this question and try to see if we will have to refer the case study or we can answer in isolation. So here what it talks about is a notification solution for the IT support distribution group, and what should we use. So I think we can answer in isolation, because what it's looking for is a notification solution. And if you see here, there are two pieces which provides notifications. So one is the SendGrid, the other is AD Connect Health. Now Network Watcher is primarily used to watch the network for infrastructure as a service, like a VM. If you want to watch the network between two VMs or VM and on-prem, you can do that. Action Group just suggests what notification service, what ways of notification, for example SMS, a voice call or an email is preferred. It will not send emails, it's just a preference. For me, the answer is one of these two. So SendGrid, this is a cloud-based service for delivering emails that matters. So primarily this is used for example, transactional and marketing related emails. In our case, we have to send emails related to alerts. We don't want to send marketing emails. So most likely the answer is AD Connect Health. Now, if you read this question, it will help you answer which of the one of the two options we should select. So in this piece of the case study, so quickly look out for, what I usually do is I just go to the individual sections and try to look out for some keywords related to the questions. For example, in this case, it is IT support. So here I could not find much of IT support. I'll go here, and here I'm finding this keyword here, IT support. I would mark it in red. So this is what, and this will help me answer this question, because what it's talking about is directory synchronization services. Whenever we talk about directory synchronization, it means AD Connect. If you don't trust me, so you see this, there are two mechanisms. One is password hash synchronization, the other is pass-through authentication. So this sort of synchronization happens between on-premises. So this synchronization works between AD on-premises and Azure AD, and AD Connect is usually installed on the target, and it helps in the synchronization between on-premises and AD. And there is also something called AD Health, which will monitor the health of the synchronization. So you see this documentation, synchronization, responsible for creating users groups and other objects, as well as making sure identity information from your on-premises users, that is this, from your on-premises user groups or on-premises Active Directory, is matching the cloud. Okay, the synchronization also includes password hashes. Now if you see health monitoring, AD Connect Health, it can provide robust monitoring and provide a central location in Azure portal to view this activity. So it provides monitoring and it also provides view to see this activity. But does AD Connect Health have features to send notifications? Is there a notification solution in place? Let's check that. You see this, you can configure email notifications. This is your Active Directory Connect Health operations, and you can configure or enable email notification. This is possible. This document explains the steps how to do that, and it is possible. So this is the right answer, AD Connect Health. Let's move forward. Now let's see one more question here. You need to recommend a strategy for migrating the database content of web app 1. You just want to migrate the database content, not the entire web app 1. Okay, so that's the keyword. Now you need to identify what recommendations will work here. So let's scan through the options. Option A, see, site recovery only works in a recovery solution, disaster recovery solution. Here there is no question of disaster recovery, neither the case study talks about disaster recovery, so this is wrong. This will not apply to our case study. Let's see option B. Now this is the option to use a backpack file, but before we do this, let's read the case study and try to understand the database section. So if I see the case study, in this section there is no database area covered, neither it's here, but here there is a special requirement for the database. Let's read this. Now see the option B, what it is suggesting is this backpack that contains Azure SQL database files. If I go to the question, so the case study, I see the existing environment is on Microsoft SQL Server 2016. There is no Azure SQL Server, so this option is wrong because it's already on SQL Server. So there is no point of creating a backpack file and move that contains the Azure SQL database files, because there is no Azure SQL database. So B is wrong. And then this one says use SQL Server transaction replication. The current environment has SQL Server. You see this case study, it says it is on Microsoft SQL Server, so this looks correct. And this is transaction replication. So what is transaction replication? So if you see this, transaction replication is a snapshot of the publication, database objects and data. It's a snapshot of the database. So you can decide what portion you want to move to Azure, and that snapshot you can take it forward. So this option seems correct, but let's also see option D. So this is option D. So I'm marking option C in green because that seems to be the potential answer. Option D again talks about Azure SQL database files. As we saw in the case study, there is Microsoft SQL Server in the existing environment and there is no Azure SQL Server. Hence option D is wrong. So this is our final answer, option C. Let's move forward to the next question. Now this is the question. It's asking about this case study. So they have given two regions, North Europe and West Europe, and there is a traffic manager, and then they are saying that you design a solution for the web tier of web app. This is a solution for the web tier of the web app, and then it is asking if the design supports the technical requirements for redundancy. So what is redundancy? Redundancy means the same thing is available at 2 or 3 places, so that if one fails, other can be used. Okay, for example, usually when we deploy databases, we deploy it having a redundant structure architecture, because if this database crash, then there will be another copy which will be available, and there will be zero impact from a availability perspective of the application for the end users. That is the goal. So does this provide redundancy? Yes, you have North Europe and you have West Europe. You have two regions doing the same thing, so there is redundancy. So this answer should be yes. The second question says the design supports auto scaling. There is no mention of anything related to auto scaling here, though this design can support auto scaling, but specifically there is no mention, hence I'm marking it as no. And the third one says the design requires a manual configuration if a Azure region fails. So for example, if North Europe fails, there will not be manual configuration changes needed to in the application to point it to West Europe. This traffic manager will automatically take care. The traffic manager will register that North Europe region has failed, and that's why it will route all requests to the West Europe. So this answer is also no. So these are my final answers. For the same case study, let's look at this question. You need to recommend a solution to meet the database retention requirement. What would you do there? So retention is the key. So database retention, let's scan through the options. Option A, geo-replication of the database. Now the main purpose of geo-replication is so that whatever is available in one region, it is also available in the other region. So if there is a disaster in one region and one region goes down, then the connectivity can still be made to the other region and the applications can be highly available. But that is not the purpose of database retention. Geo-replication will not help you with database retention. Hence A is wrong. Let's see option C, configure Azure site recovery. See, site recovery, always remember, whenever you talk about recovery, it is always related to disaster recovery. This question is talking about database retention and not database recovery from a disaster. That's why C is wrong. Let's see option D. Option D says use automatic database backups. So even if you keep taking backups, multiple copies, that does not talk about database retention. Retention means, for example, you want the same database to be retained for 7 years, for 10 years. Sometimes there are requirements from an audit perspective. For example, in financial companies and banks, there is a requirement that your data should be stored in archive for 7 years. So that means your database has to be retained for 7 years. That's the retention. So you cannot do that just with backups. Now let's see option B, because that is the only left option which should be correct. But let's see, configure a long-term retention policy. So this looks correct because common sense says it is talking about retention. Any of the other options were not talking about retention. That's why this looks correct. But let's see. So let's look at this documentation. This is talking about long-term retention, how it works. So what it does is long-term retention. If a long-term retention policy is configured, right? If you have configured this policy, these backups are copied to different blobs for long-term storage. What it does is it creates backup. So if you see here, it leverages full database backup that are automatically created to enable point in time restore. Okay. So for example, on 21st of June, you have taken this backup automatically, and this you will move to, where will you move? You will move to storage, something like a blob storage somewhere, and you keep it for 7 years. If you're if you're for banking and your RBI requirement says that you have to maintain these database backups for 7 years, you can do that. So this is our final answer. We will log this. So this is all you can see on the Fabricam case study. Usually the questions are somewhere similar or same. If you get this case study in the exam, please subscribe to my channel. In my next part, I'll cover one more case study. So this brings us to the end of this video. We will see you in the next part.